And we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We're back, Homeroom, and we are just beginning. This is when I start to get in my feelings. Just beginning the new topic, multi-series part that we're doing on the intersection of screen time and child development. And I have struggled with how to get this party started. How to get this party started quickly, as a matter of fact. So I did a little bit of big picturing. Sorry about that. Let me do it this way. Um, Copy this. Let me pin this up to the top for the live audience. So those of you that are in the room, let's say, for example, you are doing your morning routine and are hands-free, you know that you're in listen-only mode. If you want, you can watch this live stream over on YouTube. I do have a few videos and clips that I'll be pulling in. And so if you are a visual learner or stimulated in that way, you might want to watch this very same live stream over on YouTube. So I'll leave that up to you. The link is above. Oh boy, what can I say? I missed Wednesday's homeroom, for the record. So I am at a 93% attendance rate, far better than the average public school student. But I just have to admit that that particular Wednesday was a very intense day. Actually, this is a great opportunity to announce. On this Sunday, I have someone coming in as a special guest. I met this person during the National Black AI Literacy Week. So I've been brought on to serve as one of the primary hosts and moderators of the discussion for the Literacy Week. And my special guest came on and actually did a presentation very much in alignment with this particular multi-part series. So I'm excited that we're going to have her on this Sunday. So on that particular Wednesday, I was doing this full day conference from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I had to leave a little bit early because, as you guys may or may not know, I also go live in a space called Husbands in Pursuit. It's a relationship room. Y'all know what it is on this app. So I'm not immune to the shenanigans in the relationship space. So it was an extremely full day. I'll put it that way. So I gave myself a little bit of extra sleep time just to manage my own energy. With all of that being said, I always have raised anxiety when it comes to starting a new topic because I deal with such big topics. It's hard to figure out what is the proper pathway to walk down this rabbit hole in a way that makes sense. So I decided to start with chemistry. I see Monica's in the building, and EB, glad that you guys are here. Arash, glad that you made it as well. And let me see what's popping off over on the YouTube. Looks like we're all good over there. Okay, so with all of that being said, I plan to do something very technical this morning. So I'm going to open up the stage, and if anybody wants to give greetings to the title, you're more than welcome to, because I honestly don't know what to expect. I'll invite you becoming. Arash is also a member, and M Monica. It's always a box of chocolates up in here. After I do some greetings and some round robins, then we're going to get into what I consider to be a very technical thing. So just so you know, my background is in biochemistry. So I don't often get a chance to do a chemistry lesson. So I'm excited to actually look into these four chemicals that the brain produces based on our experience. It's generally based on external stimulus. And ultimately, from this very natural point of departure, these chemical pathways and biochemicals have been built in over, if you're into, modern biology, tens of thousands of years of evolutionary biology. And there are very, how would I say, critical survival mechanisms these chemicals serve in order to moderate our behavior. So they're good. The problem is what we needed them for thousands of years ago, we don't need them for now. And the way that they were stimulated thousands of years ago. They're stimulated in new ways now. So what I want to do is I lay the groundwork for this issue of the intersection of screen time and our kids' development in particular, but you guys are all part of this digital landscape. And so it's affecting your brain too. Yours is a lot less plastic than the kids' brains. And so the power of the external stimuli that influence the brain to release these chemicals is far more powerful when you're talking about a very plastic brain. And when those pathways start to get entrenched, we get to see what is considered addictive behavior. But I don't want to go too far too fast. I like to slow walk. I like to preheat the oven before I cook. Shout out to Fro, my sous chef up in here. So let's slow walk this thing. Okay, before I go too far, let me give greetings. I have Miss Cleo in the building. I'm glad that you're here. Welcome to the space. If you're available, please introduce yourself. And if you have any thoughts to the title, I'd love to hear them. If you're available, ma'am, the mic is yours.
Good morning. It's just me.
Hey,
Um,
I know
um,
that PTR anywhere.
oh, okay. I'm like, people see the new name and they're like, who is that? I'm like, it's still me. Um, welcome. I don't have science is not my my field of choice. So I'm looking forward to hearing about this and seeing any interconnections because I know there are many with like students with special needs. That's really my jam right there. So I'm looking forward to learning and being able to apply some of my learning to my most needy students. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome. I don't plan to hit that nail on the head, but over the
Oh
course of our journey, no, you're in the right
yeah.
place. Over the course of our journey, right now, I'm just going to lay some groundwork. So I think it'll be very interesting. But keep this foundational lesson in mind as we progress, because things are going to get really quite interesting. I think I have sent out the invitations that I need to. So I'm going to go ahead and cook. I see Carla came back through. Also, my fellow moderator. So I'm going to mod you two up so that you can keep things cordial up in here. And why don't I start with the clip? So if you are visually stimulated, I'm going to play my first clip. You might want to catch it over on the YouTube channel if you'd like. But I'm a big fan of The Diary of a CEO, and he brought on a brain expert, and he has these really well edited intro clips. And so I think it might be a great way for this topic to be introduced. So check this out. Hopefully everything is hooked up correctly and you'll be able to hear. Somebody hit me in the chat and let me know if there's any problems with the audio. All right, please enjoy.
And the scientists discovered that if they put food in the rat's mouth, the rat would eat. But if you put the food even a body length away, the rat will starve to death, which tells us that dopamine is fundamental to get the things that we need for our basic survival. Now, every time we're doing something that's pleasurable, from sugar to video games, work, pornography, social media, that will affect dopamine. And the more dopamine that's released, the more likely that drug or behavior is to be addictive. But also the genetic risk of addiction is about 50 to 60%. So if you have a biological parent or grandparent with addiction, you are more likely to develop that addiction. We have to keep it in balance in order to stay healthy.
Dr. Anna Lemke is professor of psychiatry at Stanford,
chief of the Stanford Addiction Clinic,
and a world-leading expert on the subject of dopamine. She will tell you how this one powerful chemical is controlling your life and what to do about it.
One of the most important findings in neuroscience in the past 75 years is that the same parts of the brain that process pleasure also process pain, and the balance wants to remain level. The problem is that we automatically seek out pleasure and avoid pain, and we're exposed to all kinds of pleasures that we have in the modern world. And our brains are reeling in response to try to compensate. Now I need more of my drug in more potent forms to get the same effect, which then leads to addiction. And that's what happened to me when I got addicted to romance novels.
Uh-oh. Not the romance novels. I'm not part of that world, ladies, so don't judge me for my misunderstanding. All right, let me clean this one up a little bit and then push ahead. So what she was talking about, and I'm going to put up just an image right quick so that you can see what these chemicals look like. So on the screen, you're going to see some chemicals, which are dopamine and serotonin. And what you'll notice about these structures is that there is sort of this ring. It looks like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what is that? A hexagon ring, or what they call an aromatic ring, and it's got a bunch of little lines attached to it. Okay, these molecules are derived from the food that we eat. So whether that's the protein or the cheese or the fruit or the grains, you get these foods into your body naturally. And then what your body does is it has mechanisms that can convert the chemicals in the food and turn them into these neurotransmitters. So I'll start with that. The second piece that I'd like to start before I do my little deep dive into these chemicals and how they work is another clip. Oh, let's see if I can get it set up here. I'm going to play this one on mute while I chop it up so that those of you who are in the audio only experience can really understand what's happening. But if you want to, you can watch the video, and I have the closed captions on. But there are 4 main biochemicals that affect our behavior due to external stimuli. And dopamine, I think, is a really good primary example. Oh man. You know what? Let me slow it down, because this lady, she's actually really good. And I would personally recommend checking out this video. I left the link in the chat for you. It's an hour-long thing, so there's no way that I can compete with the Diary of a CEO. I'm lo-fi right now, but I would, recommend it if you have a chance. All right, let me let her continue to cook, because she says something really interesting here as well about this drug.
What activities that I do every day have an impact on my dopamine?
Well, probably almost everything, in some ways. Every time we are doing something that's pleasurable, reinforcing, rewarding, that will affect dopamine. It's really the primary signal that lets us know that this thing is potentially important for our survival, as I mentioned. But even aversive stimuli can trigger dopamine.
What's aversive?
Something that's painful or not pleasurable. Dopamine gets involved in that equation. Anything that's novel or new is something that triggers our dopamine in our reward pathway. Dopamine is fundamental for movement, so not just pleasure and reward, but also movement. So, for example, Parkinson's disease, which is a disease related to stiffness and tremor, is caused by a depletion of dopamine in a part of the brain called the substantia nigra. And as dopamine gets depleted in that part of the brain, people lose the ability to move their bodies. And it's probably no coincidence that the same neurotransmitter that is so important for pleasure, reward, motivation is also really important for movement, because most organisms have to locomote toward the object of their desire.
I think that's a good place to stop. So we got to go all the way back. And again, this is based on an assumption of evolutionary biology. So if you're a creationist, maybe none of this matters, right? And maybe the earth is flat too. So I just want to make that distinction and identify my underlying assumption here. But when we talk about, Miss Cleo, did you want to jump in before I continue?
No, I was laughing at, and maybe the earth is flat too.
Okay, cool. So from an evolutionary biology, based on what she just said, notice how things have evolved, right? Or how nature has selected for these chemicals. Because what it says is, if the monkey wants to climb the tree in order to get to the banana, that's an external stimulus. He sees the banana, and now he needs to go climb that tree, put forth effort to get that thing that he wants. Well, over the course of, I don't know how you want to count it, tens of thousands of years, the brain has designed a neurochemical that will stimulate the body to give it the energy and the desire to do what it needs to do in order to get that thing that it wants to get. Okay, so that's kind of the underlying assumption here. And as she mentioned in the earlier clip regarding the, let me drop this down for the YouTube crew. In the earlier clip regarding the mice example, right? If they put in that thing that totally reduced their dopamine and you put the cheese just out of reach, the mice won't even exert the energy to get that thing that it wants. And so that's how scientists have created this connection that, okay, it's the presence of this chemical that actually stimulates the body into action to get that thing that it wants. So that's sort of where I want to start this concept that the body creates these chemicals based on what's happening in the external environment that can then affect our internal environment and can affect our mood, our behavior, our decision making, and all of that. So I want to just lay that down as some groundwork. And now I want to move into these 4 key biochemicals. So like I said, this is a very technical one. And if you're not here for it, I totally understand. Okay. In the future, we're going to get into the smoke, right? I'm going to talk about Roblox and how people are pretending to be kids in order to, predate, to be predators. And, I got all that smoke for the app. But for now, we're just going to lay down some serious groundwork. So let me put this into 2 categories. We have category 1, which are called neurotransmitters, and we have category 2, which I'm going to call hormones. Okay, so for the neurotransmitters, what we're talking about are chemicals that are sent from one neuron to another neuron. And depending on the neurotransmitter, it will stimulate the next neuron. A neuron is basically a nerve cell. So you have a whole bunch of them in your brain, but really and truly you have them all over your body. Okay. So every time you touch something, hear something, smell something, see something, with all those 5 senses, those are all being stimulated by your neural pathways. And you really only experience them because the brain interprets those signals in a certain way. So certain neurotransmitters are being sent. Different ones stimulate the brain or those nerve cells in different ways. I'm going to talk about 2 neurotransmitters and 2 hormones, and hopefully you'll see the connection when it comes to issues of screen time along that journey. So thank you guys for being here. Let's start with dopamine. The dopamine lady laid down some groundwork, and you can check out her video. It's what I call the instant gratification trigger. Okay, so the function of dopamine is to, as I was alluding, to regulate your motivation, your attention, your pleasure-seeking faculties, and also what we could call like reward-based learning. So this, what we call in education parlance, positive reinforcement. I will reward you for doing something in order to get you to do that more because you'll have the expectation of said reward. If you sit quietly for all of class, then at the end of class, everybody gets, the pizza party or, whatever, something like that. The promise of reward to manipulate behavior. How does it get released? If there's something exciting going on in your environment, if there is something new or the promise of something pleasurable, like if you're not, listen, I'm a son of a slave, so I'm a bit lactose intolerant. And yet still, I want me a little bit of ice cream, okay? My brain gets stimulated even if it's not good for me. So something that is considered pleasurable, sugar, as she mentioned, pornography, something new and unexpected, like when you go to the local, your local store and pick up one of those lotto tickets. That little bit that you experience when you're scratching off that ticket and you're not sure if you won, all of that is a dopamine situation, okay? Because you're not exactly sure what's going to happen. So that unpredictability. Now, how does this connect to our major topic? Well, I'm going to argue that the designers of our smartphones took that into consideration in order to stimulate your dopamine. I don't think it was an accident, but it was on purpose. So when you make a post and then you wait and you have maybe, I'm just going to suggest, a little feeling as the likes start coming in and you wonder if anybody's going to resonate with that post that you made, and you spend all that time getting it together and then you post it, and then there's that gap between you posting it and that first like. And then whether or not it's going to ding, 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 as you get more likes, that is an external stimulus that's triggering your dopamine, those neurotransmitters, and it gives you a certain feeling. The unpredictability is the whole concept behind the design of the thumb swipe. You don't know what's going to happen next. So when your intention is to just jump on to YouTube or to Instagram or TikTok, whatever your thing is, and then you swipe and you don't know what's going to happen next. And then you want to swipe again because there's that unknown, and maybe you like one or maybe you don't. And if you like it, you'll swipe. But even if you don't like it, as she mentioned, there was a negative experience, you didn't like that video, you're going to swipe again to see what the next one is. And so what the designers of these screens have figured out is how to create an external stimulus that can affect your behavior. And then next thing you know, 45 minutes later, an hour later, you still swiping. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Like, God damn, let me go to bed. So that's all what's happening with dopamine. Okay. So, we see it with social media, but we also see it with games. We see it in a lot of areas by design. So it's what I am going to refer to as this loop of reward-seeking behavior. Now let me apply it to our kids, because that's really what this whole journey is going to be about. What kids may experience, and you may experience this as well, is a reduced tolerance for boredom. And we've seen it. Those of you who are in the classroom or you deal with little ones, they do not like to be bored. Okay, we're starting to see more and more this need to be stimulated, and this need even to be overstimulated in order to get any sort of reaction out of them. Because when these things are saturated, you have too many neurotransmitters, then you need even more stimulation in order to get you to chase after that thing that you desire. So I've got some concerns about this. This chronic overstimulation can ultimately desensitize that dopamine pleasure, so that simple things that would normally bring pleasure to a person, like going out to play, touching some grass, these things in the good old days used to stimulate us. We used to want to be outside on our bike and do all kinds of stuff, but now they would rather just sit inside and swipe because it's far less energy, right? Go back to, and I'll move on after this. Go back to the idea of the monkey having to climb the tree. That's a whole lot of energy to get a banana. Well, now our kids don't need to exert that much energy in order to stimulate these dopamine centers. And so now they could just sit in the crib, and the only effort they need is to swipe with their thumb. Okay, let me move on because I don't want to get too far into it. And I hope that I'm offering some value here. Let's move on to serotonin. Okay, so serotonin is also a neurotransmitter, but it has ultimately a different effect. So serotonin is used in mood regulation. If dopamine is a stimulant to get the body to move into action, serotonin is a calming effect. What do we call that? Alcohol, like an inhibitor, right? It gets you to be calm and cool. It stabilizes your emotions. It helps you control your impulses, and it can be converted into melatonin, serotonin, melatonin, right? I got bars up in here, in order to help you sleep. You're going to see where I'm going with this, I hope. So these things are closely tied to routines. They're closely tied to physical activity. So if you're physically active, your serotonin gets released so that you get that sense of being tired and that sense of being worn out. But it's also a bit of euphoria after a good game or whatever kind of play that you're into. And it also gets stimulated by human to human interaction. So our children, this is why physicians say that when you have very, very small infant-sized babies, human-to-human touch is so important for them to thrive because it releases that serotonin and helps with that sense of human connection. So these are also very important. Let's talk about how it affects screen time. Let me just check in with my crew here. I appreciate you, Leticia. I'll drop that one up. And the impact of screen time. Let's say you have too much screen time, especially late at night. Well, what that's going to do is disrupt your serotonin production. You produce serotonin, your brain converts it into melatonin, and then you go to sleep. But if you're on that screen constantly stimulated, you're getting more dopamine, less serotonin. So then it's harder for you to sleep. So you're naturally, you just feel awake, which is how you can look up at 2 a.m. like, dang, where did the time go? I got in the bed at 10:30. That's because that serotonin didn't kick in to give you that sleepiness experience. So it messes up your sleep cycle. And the other thing that it does, in terms of the impact, is that the screen time can limit your natural serotonin, which gets boosted from play, sunlight, and human interaction. So if you're indoors on your screen, then you're also not getting the serotonin from doing other things that help regulate your impulse control. So that idea of serotonin also plays a very important role. And if we don't allow our evolutionary biology to give us the right amount of serotonin, then what are we going to see? More destabilized moods. Think about our kids. I'm sure if you're on social media, you have seen what is happening here. That's a great question. I'll get to that question in a bit. It increases your irritability, and even symptoms of anxiety and depression are all connected to the issue of serotonin. There is a question that came up in the chat about screen time and is it all equal? And I actually have let me tell you, since it came up, the big picture here. So I have planned a 5-part series, and these are the titles that me and ChatGPT came up with. So first one on this Sunday is going to be Wired for Stimulation, How Screens Rewire the Developing Brain. So I'm laying the biochemical groundwork now, but on Sunday, I have a special guest who's going to help talk about it at sort of that layer 2 level. Then the following Sunday, I'm going to talk about the journey from Coco Melon to TikTok and look at how the screen habits of kids from infancy all the way through adolescence. Then I'm going to talk on the 3rd week about the running title is Who's to Blame? Big Tech, Busy Parents, or Bureaucrats? So we're going to try to assign accountability to what is going on and how we got here. Maybe from the bureaucrats, it's a matter of regulation. Busy parents would rather have the screen babysit their kids, or big tech nefariously designing these tools to control our brains. Sorry, I get stimulated myself sometimes. Let me go outside and touch some grass, get some serotonin in me. Okay, next in week 4 is where I'm finally going to address your question, which is the ed tech dilemma. So I want to talk about, are all screens created equal from the lens of content, context, and also I want to highlight some offline rituals that can help balance out what's going on today. And then finally, in week 5 is when I'm going to bring all the smoke, what I'm currently titling Pixelated Playgrounds, Gaming, Grooming, and the New Frontier of Online Exploitation. So follow me along this journey. And ultimately, I think we're going to address a lot of those, tackle a lot of those subtopics. And so I'm excited that you guys are going to join me. Miss Cleo, what comes up for you, dear?
So my question is more around, when you're saying screen time, do you mean any time you're looking at a screen, or there's specific thing? Like, it feels like a slightly loaded statement. So like when I hear screen time, a lot of times people talk about watching like YouTube or this. Is that the same as being on like a video call? And that's more like, are we talking about any form of being on a screen, or a screen that's moderated through, like things that give you like hearts and likes and follows and stuff like that? That's the only part I wanted to get some clarity on.
Sure. And there is a significant distinction. I'll offer that because let's say, well, it's a great question. I'll use your example
we don't have
first.
To dig into it.
No.
I just wanted to know what you mean when you're saying it, between now and when you address it in a more specific way. Like, what do you mean more so than anything when you say screen time?
No, I appreciate the distinction. And I think for the good of the group, it may be something that is worthy to address now and help people understand where I'm going on the journey. So when I think about something like talking to grandma on the FaceTime, right? I think that is a very different screen time experience than, for example, watching Coco Melon, which is specifically designed to have bright lights and changing colors and these Pavlovian style, sounds, and all of that, right? And research has shown, and I'll bring it into along our journey here, research has shown that what they've even done is they bring kids into the lab. And when a child, a 2-year-old, turns their head and stops watching the screen, they'll note that, and then they'll edit the video in order to keep that kid locked into the screen, right? So when I say screen time, broadly speaking, I'm really talking about how these things are designed to stimulate our brains in a certain way, like the Coco Melon example. At the same time, though, the parallel and where screen time becomes a broad connection to this is that if a child is in the house all day talking to grandma, that means that they're not outside getting that vitamin D, touching that grass, getting those serotonin levels. And so there is a underlying impact of screen time writ large, but there is also a very significant and specific problem with the, how would I call it? Mental stimulation by design. And so I'm really leaning more on that design piece, but it's important to say that broadly speaking, even if, and I'll close with this and then move on, even when I think about ed tech, anybody who has seen screen time in the classroom, there has been a very strong movement towards the gamification of education using these screens. And so they turn them all into games. You know, there's a little ding ding, or there's a little puzzle, or there's a little prize. And so even ed technology is using these same design elements in order to impact the screen, even though they're saying they're using it for good reasons, right? So we're going to get into all of that. And so I appreciate you giving me the chance to kind of foreshadow. Okay, guys, let me move over to the hormone side. You know, I'd be having these, my brain thinks weirdly. So when I was working with my ChatGPT, I was trying to come up with a clever title called Neuro Horny, because I wanted to talk about the neurotransmitters and the hormones, but ChatGPT was like, nah, bro. That's not gonna work. So come up with something a little more clear for the audience. So sometimes I'll be trying to out clever myself. Anyway, I want to invite you guys up. So after I finish this brief treatise on hormones, there's two hormones that I want to talk about: cortisol and oxytocin. Oxytocin is very similar to the popular drug Oxy that you guys hear about. So hopefully you guys will be able to see the connection there. But I know that you guys may not be as deeply immersed in the biochemistry as perhaps me and Becoming Dr. Ajwa are, but there are some questions that I think can come up that are good for discussion as we use this chemistry lesson as a point of departure to what may come up next. I see there's a lot of pink tickets as well, so I will make this offer. If you're getting something of value, consider joining the house, so that when I do this homeroom, which is a morning show, it's really designed while you're getting ready or you're making your commute or whatever, for you to have something of real value in your morning routine. So if you appreciate that, please join the house, and I would love to have you as part of this crew. Okay, let me finish that, and then I'll consider looking at some of these other questions. Okay, cortisol, oxytocin. Cortisol is what we consider the stress hormone. It's a hormone that's released by a certain part of the brain, I'm going to call it the adrenal gland, and it is in response to stress, again, an external stimulus. So what does it do? It prepares your body to either fight, have flight, or to freeze. And so in that circumstance, it is the thing that naturally causes your heart rate to increase. It actually opens up your blood vessels so that you have more blood flow in case you need to run away from a bear or a man. Forgive the pun, but that was a viral trend going around. And it also like dilates your pupils so that you're more aware and can kind of see more stimulus coming in. So it's preparing your body to deal with what potentially could be a threat or a stressful situation. Now, you can imagine that if this hormone is overproduced in the body, what kind of effect it can have. And in the social science worlds, we've talked about that. What does it mean for my lived experience to be a black man in America? It means that my cortisol is probably overstimulated, because when the cops pull me over, what happens in my brain might not be what happens in someone else's brain, because of the stress level that comes with my historical context. Okay. When I go into the workplace, I have to be on a certain level of hyper alertness. Think about me as a black man in a public school. I'm already seen as a threat. and my caring behavior could be misinterpreted as grooming, and my interaction with my colleagues could be misinterpreted as threatening. And so I've got to be hyper aware of the skin that I'm in as I navigate the world. And so this cortisol stress hormone is something that I think when it's overstimulated, it can impair my immune function, my capacity to learn, and even has an impact on memory, according to certain research. Okay, let me talk about how it's connected to screen time. We see these days, and I think, and again, thank you, Miss Cleo, for asking the question. We see these days in what I'm calling screen time. These chemicals. Okay. When we have these fast-paced, overstimulating, and violent content, I look at what my son watches on his Instagram, and he doesn't have a phone. I monitor it. He uses it on my device, so I'm right there monitoring what comes through, how the algorithm is feeding him. And it's wild work, the amount of stimulation that he gets. So you probably have seen it in your own. What they're doing now is they'll do a split screen. They'll have the speaker on one side and then something totally different on the other. Maybe these like ASMR style videos where they're squishing something or something's falling down or whatever, right? It's really interesting. But they have like two things that seem to be disconnected happening at the same time. And then, of course, there's all that music that underlies it, right? So there's a lot happening in these little 30 or 15-second videos. So that's what I mean when I talk about overstimulating. And violence, you can't get away from violence these days in social media. And so all of those things will raise your cortisol level. Yeah, just watching something on a video can release stress hormones. So for our young kids who can't quite distinguish, and nowadays, I want to say, I wish I had the video clip here with me, but I want to say that I watched a video of a guy who was a researcher in this space who said 40% of 2-year-olds have access to a screen or something like that. And so can you imagine a 2-year-old who has no idea how to navigate or moderate or identify these hormones flowing through them? But because of evolutionary biology and what's happening on these screens, they're releasing stress hormones in a little tiny baby with a totally undeveloped brain who's barely even developed the capacity for language. But now they've got to navigate these stressful cortisol hormones. And what do they do with that? How do they release that out, right? So it's really interesting. What else can I say? My concern is these elevated cortisol levels in early childhood are associated with long-term effects over time. And so I will just leave that piece there. Shout out to the chat. I don't know what's going on over there, but I'm going to trust the judgment of my mods and whoever, Mando, I'll bring you up if you want to come up and join the conversation after this last piece. So this is my fourth and final segment, and then I will take it from there. Oxytocin. This one is what we call the bonding hormone. So what oxytocin does is it facilitates social bonding. It facilitates trust. It facilitates empathy. And it is generally released in face-to-face interaction, as I mentioned earlier, physical touch, eye contact, that sort of a thing is when you get oxytocin released rather. And so the problem isn't that screen times release these things, but when you are on the screen, that means that you are not having these face-to-face physical touch type of interactions. And so you have a under release of oxytocin, which now has an impact on your ability to bond with other people. And so what screen time is doing is it is replacing what used to be human to human interaction. So whether that's a parent who is at the park and their kid is playing, but they are watching the screen themselves, that child is viewing that and is not getting that human to human interaction where normally you would be pushing them on the swing or playing tag with them. Those are the kinds of ways that these bonding chemicals get released. And similarly, if you are having a super busy day, you're on the Zoom and your little one wants to sit here and, start playing drums with the pots in the kitchen. It's way easier to be like, here, take this iPad, right? And so now that's where we start to see this disconnect between the natural human to human interaction from a caregiver and how much easier it is for these screens to babysit them. Okay, I've talked way too long, but hopefully I've laid some important groundwork. And now it's time to open up the stage. So, hey, Shay, Amunette, look, my little crew is here. Not that you guys are little or anything. I just want to say I'm happy that my core crew. Invitations have gone around. In this conversation, you're more than welcome to. Hopefully, I know you were hitting up the chat, and so I'd love to have you come up and articulate what you were describing in the chat. But I have a few questions if we want to push this out. But before I do that, I'll go to my trusted moderator crew. What came up for you guys before I push out some of my discussion questions? I'll start with Miss Cleo and then Carla. Carla, thanks for coming. Miss Cleo, anything come up for you?
No, I just got to work, so I was a little in and out. My apologies.
Oh, no worries. This is what the morning show is all about, to fill that space while you do your thing. Carla, anything come up for you before I push some of these discussion questions out?
No, I thought it was educational, first of all. And as you were going along, I put together kind of like a summary of what you were saying so people could follow along, because it was a lot of information.
It's a lot.
And one of the things that I didn't realize was some of the connections. I put the link in the chat and you can pull it up. I'm no expert. I think I captured a lot of what you were saying, and I highlighted in red the things that were related to screen time. And so it just might help as we go forward in the conversation. The one I will note that I missed was the relationship or lack of to oxytocin, because I didn't highlight anything red there. And I said, there's no correlation. But as soon as you started talking, I realized it is a correlation, because it takes us away from other social skills that the children would use to be developed. So thank you. Really educational. I'm interested to hear what the audience thinks.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I must acknowledge this was designed to be head heavy, okay? Because I think it lays an important groundwork when you understand the underlying thing that's happening in our bodies. And I hope that as I explained what's going on with these neurotransmitters and hormones, that perhaps even in your own lived experience with this technology, that you might be able to connect how you feel, or maybe moving forward when you get onto your screens, you might be able to see what's going on in your lived experience. So take that and then put it into the body of a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, and you can start to see how I have concern about the impact of screen time. I'll put that in air quotes. And our child's brain development. So yeah, it's head heavy and very educational, but hopefully it will be that thing that connects to what we're going to be experiencing over the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks.
Hassan, also, as you go forward, I'm hoping you have a segment in there, because I'm on board and I'm learning and going forth. But I'd like to talk, I'm hoping you're going to put some space in here to talk about the contrast, because what I see is I can equate this to other technology changes, right? If you go through time, we've had inventions that things replace things, right? The airplane replaced the horse-drawn carriage, the TV replaced the radio, and these same arguments about screen time with the TV. And it may be to a different level, but I say that because as times change, these things are probably not going to go away. So we have to learn to use them to our advantage. And how do we use them as an educational tool for our children versus as a babysitter, which is where I think the harm comes in, is how you moderate it. I'll land.
No, I appreciate that. And I'll even take it one step further, because it's not just the screen as a babysitter, but also, as Ms. Cleo alluded to, the screen as an educational tool. You know, is it appropriate to replace a learning experience that could happen, let's say, in a little science lab where the kids are mixing up stuff or whatever, or being outside touching grass? The learning value that comes from that as a complex experience, can that be replaced by a 2-dimensional screen, even though it achieves the learning objectives, as I put that in big air quotes. So I think even beyond just the parents' personal use of screen time, I think even we as educators need to ask ourselves, maybe giving our kids a piece of paper and a pencil and having them actually touch the physical objects and push through has learning value that cannot be underestimated or undermined by a screen. So I think there's something there for us to consider as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think now
I
you're cooking. I'm sorry, Adrian. I'll land.
no.
I think now you're cooking because I am a strong proponent of it's it's yes and amen. And I think it's that moderation. I don't think anything replaces that face to face time because you're learning bonding. There's so much more that happens in the real space. But I don't think that using screen time to assist in some ways is a bad thing either. I don't think it's all or nothing.
Agreed. Totally agree. Miss Cleo?
I was just gonna say I don't think it's if it's appropriate. I think it's when is it appropriate is the question to do some digging into, because there are times of it be I think we can all agree there are times that it's appropriate, right? Maybe based off of how that person's brain is wired, or maybe their current situation that they actually don't like. A lot of technology is used to become accessible in a financially advantageous way. It may be cheaper to have a program than to have a chemistry set, right? And so when is it appropriate, and when do you like switch over from we just got to figure out the money, like those type of things. So I really think digging into at some point the when should we do the thing versus if we should do it. I think we're past if, right? It's not if AI is going to be here. It's not
Right.
if we use AI. It's when we use these things, when we think gamification is actually more beneficial than harmful, right? I think that's really the question. I think if we spend too much time in the if, it's kind of a almost a waste, because we're going to do these things and use these things. It's a matter of when and how I would even position in there. So that's just something to kind of think about during the series, is that framing of when and how versus if or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I'm going to offer a pushback. Ultimately, I'm going to end up right where you are, the question of when, but I'm going to push back a little bit. I do want to give a shout out to the chat. Yes, Annette would have been perfect for this. I reached out to her, but this is not a good time for her to be live. But what I will say as a shout out to Amunette and to everyone in the room, I really wanted in my deep, deep heart to do a comparison and contrast. And this might not be the time, but at some point I want to look at early childhood education models like Montessori, like what we see going on over in China, like what we see happening over in Norway versus what we see happening in Chicago. Right. And so I think there's something there, but maybe it's for a different multi-part series. But shout out to Amunette and shout out to Annette for total expert. I'll introduce her since she's not in the room at another time. But to your question of if and when, here's my pushback, and I think you're absolutely right. Number one, I have already pre-planned a interactive poll during the live conference on Sunday. And one of the questions that I'm going to ask during the poll time is, when is it the right time to give a child their, quote, their own, in air quotes, personal device? So that question of when, I think, is really critical. And I'll offer my pushback in this way. I think there is a pathway where one parent, well-meaning, says, a shout out to Mando, I'm gonna come to you in a second, where one parent says, AI is here. I'm gonna have my child lean all the way in. So we're going to be prompting, cartoon characters, age appropriate cartoon characters. I'm going to have AI help my child generate a story, so they're going to give me some prompts of characters and setting, and AI is going to generate the story. And then I'm going to read that story at bedtime. And now the kid gets this experience of something that they created before they go off to sleep. And I'm going to lean in all the way in very early, because as they master AI, let's say, they will be the ones who rule the world. That's one pathway. Then there's another very well-meaning parent who says, I'm tapping all the way out until the last possible moment. So for them, their win might not be until high school, 14, 15. Whereas this other parent says their win is going to be 2, 3, 4 years old when they start to be exposed. Now, this other parent's very valid argument is, because my kid doesn't have screen time, they're going to get all of that oxytocin, right? They're going to have a proper balance of the cortisol and the dopamine and the serotonin. They're going to be outside where they're going to learn things like grit in a three-dimensional world. They're going to have the opportunity to regulate their own emotions so that when they loop around and these two kids meet at 14, who knows how that plays out? Maybe the one kid is so far behind that they're really not tapped into the modern world, because as we've seen, things are accelerating so fast. What happens between a 2-year-old and a 14-year-old, the world could be totally different. We could be living in the Jetsons in 14 years for all I know. On the other side, that kid that was, all up into the tech, they might be more fragile, more stimulated, more irritable and all of that. So I think there is an argument to be made, and I respect both, about these two very different pathways that a child may take and where and when they meet up, let's say at early adolescence or middle adolescence. Who has developed, air quotes, better? Who is more ready for the real world? I don't know what that answer is. Well, I have an 8-year-old, so I'm actually practicing it in my own way, but I don't know how it's going to play out either. So I see the chat is blowing up. I see people are coming in, so I'm glad that you guys are here.
Pushback though. I didn't hear any pushback.
Like I said, in the end, I'm going to agree with you that the question is when, right? The only pushback I said was when is the win? Sooner or later is the ultimate question. So no, I think we ultimately agree. Mando.
Okay. I was like, I was listening.
No, we're on the same page. Hey, Mando, thanks for coming up, man. I do remember you now, and we had some very potent disagreements in a very different context. So I'm curious, since you're up here on my stage, what's come up for you? Hey, man, the mic is yours.
Before I jump to the disagreements of a totally unrelated conversation,
we don't have to do that on this stage. We can save that for a different time. Yeah.
It's just something I realized, but nonetheless, I'd say. To the development of children, right? And I love the fact that Miss Cleo made the distinction of if and when, because we are at the when. We are not at the if anymore, and I think technology is here to stay. I tend to like to look at the positives, although I can acknowledge the negatives, negative impacts of them. I would say though that I believe that screen time, right? This kind of nature that we've developed as human beings with like automated education, I guess you could say, or technology. I think it could optimize learning. I really think, as opposed to what we were used to, right? This form of like analog type of learning or education. I think it can optimize it, make it more efficient if it's done right, right? I think we could see development in children occur a lot more, like basically more expedient, right? And at higher rates, especially at the ages that we, give our children tablets, right? Or the digital devices, and what is the content they're constantly engaging with. Now, if you give your child social media at a young age, we could see the dangers in that, right? But if most of what they're doing when they're engaging with digital platforms is education based, that means you see more classroom time. I put quotes around classroom because I'm thinking of it like a digital kind of world, but you see more time being involved in that, and it's been notoriously proven that kids who are more successful in education is like a collaborative effort at home and at school. So if they're always learning, right, on a digital platform, it's like you could see how I think these developments can increase. Now, social skills, right, that could be introduced in a later age with social media, quote unquote, but a more appropriate form of social media for their specific age level, right? Maybe social media for children of a school aging group, and it you know, and it maybe expands more and more. And I guess we could point out the dangers in that,
Right.
Because that can be unsafe as well.
Well, let me, no, you bring up some great questions. And if I may, I see Anointed Steps here. And how do I say? I know she's in this space. And so if you have time to come up and weigh in, I would certainly appreciate your point of view. But I wonder if Miss Cleo, if you're still available, I know how it is. So if not, it's totally fine to respond to that. I don't know. And I'm curious, actually, now that he's brought it up. To what degree are you and the folks and your colleagues using artificial intelligence? Do you guys have an official policy one way or the other? Are you personally using it? And in particular, to respond to what Mando Zero was talking about, this idea of optimizing learning and how it could be, how this technology could be used to individualize learning and maybe even give every kid an IEP, you know? So I'm curious where you're at with that, Miss Cleo.
So it's interesting that you asked that specific question because my school just went through this thing called the AI Accelerator, which was designed for school leaders to really contemplate the guardrails, guidelines, and guidance. I think there are three G's. I'll have to look it up again because I'm in the process of moving around AI, right? And so thinking about like what it looks like at a school. So we are in heavy discussion. I use AI daily.
Hmm.
Every single day there's a way in which I'm using AI, whether it's on Clubhouse to see if what somebody's jibber jabbering about has any sense of reality,
Right.
whether it's to write an email that is kind when I'm very frustrated with a parent. But one of the more beneficial ways I've been really digging into it is to help create level readings for children on topics that we don't purchase like a curriculum for really any of our subjects in the sense of what people think of as a curriculum, like a box curriculum. So we do an ocean, for example, we do an ocean issues unit with the kids. But articles that are related to ocean issues typically are well above a second grade reading level, right? So we're reading about things like the impacts of oil spills, overfishing, shark finning,
Mm.
trout tourism's impact on Ma, don't come up here with that nonsense. I'm just gonna say that. Um, and things like that. Those topics are generally quite heavy and quite dense, and so they're generally not really accessible to even some of our higher grade two readers, let alone some of our more struggling readers. So I've been working with AI to create leveled passages for them, multiple choice questions to like work on their comprehension
Yeah.
of the topics and open-ended questions to support their analyzing of it. I've helped had it help me create several rubrics aligned to standards, to be more standards aligned,
Yeah.
and questions that could help prompt students discussion that would lead to those answers in a way that's not just frivolous and like circling answers, but really rich conversations. I've had AI help me with some of my special needs students, of course, leaving their names out around, hey, this is a diagnosis. These are the behaviors we're seeing. These are the strategies we've tried with limited success, lots of success, and no success. Where should we go next? And so it's been really helpful to have a thought partner in that way. I've also just used it to thought partner, like, hey, I'm thinking about this, like, again, in like a clubhouse space someone says something, I go, I naturally kind of disagree with this. I see the facts say this. What do you think? And that's been really helpful to help keep me centered around where I might be going wrong, but also things that I should also be considering in the topic. So uh, I've leaned into AI. And then the last thing is with
Hmm.
our kindergartners, we do a class pet. So I was building a bot for the kids because asking and answering questions is a really, really powerful skill for young students to really get a home. a hold of. We see the lack of it with people on this app, being able to ask and answer, questions both directly and clearly. And so trying to build a bot that helps them take on the personality of our class pet, with which is like Clifford,
Mm.
Franklin, Curious George. Ask it questions where it'll answer it, or it'll prompt the student on how to better ask a question. So there are ways that also then moving into students actually having an engagement, and that looks different for older kids, of where bots are being built to help them ideate through things. So I know that was a bit of probably longer than what you were interested in,
No,
but
it's an
those are
interesting
some of the
case.
ways.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's a good case study to kind of address for Mando how it's actually being used on the ground. So, Anointed Steps, I know that you're also in this space. And so I want to, first of all, let me just say this. We're at 59 minutes after the hour. So this is the after party. Normally, we do the 1 hour time together just to kind of help people get their day started with some high quality content. But it seems like this conversation is just getting started. So if you need to leave to, go to tend to whatever's going on, like I totally understand because we are moving into overtime. But I do want to honor the voices of the people who have come. So let's go ahead and extend this conversation a bit. So Anointed Steps, and then Poppy Mod, and then Dr. Arthur, we're going to get you all in. So Anointed Steps, thanks for coming up. What came up for you? How, yeah, I'll just leave it like that. What are you present to? If you're ready, ma'am, the mic is yours.
Okay, so for me, I believe that the healthy balance of screen time is good. Um, there has to be a common balance between it all, and the individual education plan is a great way to implement that. So before school starts, having an evaluation with them, of
Mm.
course, because most uh, mostly during the summer they'll have free access to devices and things like that. Um, so we want to evaluate them coming off of that break to kind of see where they are with the screen time and the overall effect it has on their engagement.
What does that evaluation look like for you? Can you unpack that before you finish your point?
Um, okay, so we can do this in a number of ways. We can actually utilize AI to be able to evaluate them because we have certain tools like deep thinking and deep learning. So we can implement those tools to actually kind of engage where the child's mind can go with it, to better curate a plan where we can implement the technology in a healthy way through incremental um, adjustments. So, like with the IEP plan, right? So, like, say you have a child that's developmentally delayed, we implement things like this, which are benchmarks, where they have to reach these certain goals. And it's a reward in some sort. So, if that is their favorite pastime, we can give it to them in a healthy manner, but we need to accomplish our goals first. And we can also utilize the technology to help accomplish those goals without crippling the child and giving the child a crutch,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. I appreciate that ad. There's that balance. And just for the good of the group, when she referred to IEP, that stands for Individualized Education Plan. This is the typical way that a person who is, I know Nazi's not here, but she's a diagnostician. So her job would be to identify students who qualify for special education services. The way that those special education services are rolled out is through an individualized education plan, an IEP, which lays out what is the school's responsibility and accountability to ensure that that child has the least restrictive environment in order to maximize their learning potential. Poppy
It
Mod.
also gives them goal. I just want to add a
Yep.
key portion of an IEP is it outlines goals that meets the students where they are, and projects out where they hope the student to get over the year of having an IEP. It outlines the legal minutes that a case manager is required to implement for that student to reach those goals, as well as gives modifications and accommodations that the school is legally bound to in the United States to adhere to for that student. Just a few key other things about the purposes of IEPs.
No, you're good. And another piece, since we went there, was for some students when they should get off of the IEP. So there's also that intention is that many students do not need to be on a special education plan for the rest of their life.
But
Poppy,
that's not the IEP itself, just as a note. That is what you do during the annual review process,
mm-hmm,
is you annually review the eligibility of that student and the necessity of it. The plan itself does not do that though,
I
right?
copy
I just
that.
want to be clear that that's a process that the team of people who implement the IEP work together to make decisions about, and whether moving from less minutes to keeping the plan, but only having the accommodations is also an option. But the plan itself's purpose is to hold people legally accountable for reaching goals, administering minutes, and implementing modifications and accommodations for the student. What those are could be greatly reduced,
Yep.
and then you could move into exiting after annual reviews or the 3-year review with a new full assessment that's been done.
I want to acknowledge, first of all, Tueri Marshall is in the building, a personal and family connector of mine. So I'm glad that you're here. I hope we add something of value. Poppy Mod and Dr. Arthur Jones, I hope that, please give me a signal if you guys have patience. If you guys need to rush, I want to respect the fact that you came up and your voices. But Anointed said that she wanted to lean in a little bit on this. So Anointed, if you could take maybe 2 or 3 minutes and respond to what you've heard, and then we'll move the mic along.
So the discussion was about writing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm a firm believer of we do need to keep implementing the writing in our education, and the reason why this is because of the neurological connection behind it of eye to hand coordination. We can't leave that out because that's a big part of us and what we do, and also being able to have steady hands when we're doing certain things. So think about even if you're an architect, you need to have some sort of ability to actually draw out the plan by hand. Okay, and also artists. So there's a level of that that I believe that we need to keep up and not dismiss that altogether.
Yeah.
Because yes, we do have more implementing of our fingers on a device than we do actually writing and getting the uh, exercise for your wrist and your fingers. Because think about long term down the line carpal tunnel and other issues, arthritis in the hands and the joints and the fingers. They need to be exercised, and writing is the perfect exercise for that.
Yeah, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that, and I won't take long because we could cook. Okay, you know I love to cook. Um, there's so much I shouldn't even respond. Let me honor the voices of those who haven't had a chance to speak yet. So, Poppy Mod, welcome to the space. I'm glad that you're here. Special shout out to Annette. Anything you want to add in the chat, if you can come up on the stage, of course, we would honor your voice as well. Okay, Poppy Mod just dropped back down. So we'll go directly to Dr. Arthur Jones. Thanks for coming up, man. Please, what are your thoughts?
I will say that AI is. I have a homeschooler, so I have 3 children. My oldest was was traditionally publicly school educated.
Hmm.
My daughter, she did a portion of her and of her traditional education, and then the last part homeschool. And my youngest, he's been homeschooled the whole time. When I say AI is one of the best education partners,
Mm.
man, it's to draft. You can draft multiple exercises. It never gets frustrated. It will break a subject down, or it will dive into the deepest sectors of just about any subject. What I found is its its ability to take real life dynamics and then teach the core subjects in conjunction with them is second to none.
Mm.
The way it like physics and sports and mathematics and chemistry, how it merges those together so you can get an understanding of each of those at the same time. I haven't seen anything like it before. I'll land there.
No, that's a sweet landing, and I appreciate it. Just by means of reset for the good of the group, we started this conversation laying down some of the fundamental groundwork, talking about the biology of what's going on as we interact with screen time. So I talked a little bit about the deep evolutionary biology. I talked about these two neurochemicals, neurotransmitters rather, and these two hormones, dopamine, serotonin, cortisol, and oxytocin. I'm not going to do a whole recap, but you can go back and watch the replay. You can see on the link above, there's a YouTube, so you can watch it either on YouTube, where I have some videos that I've integrated as well, or you can listen to the replay here on the app. So you can go back, but this is, I think, what's happening in our brain and how the brain functions as it relates to the neurotransmitters and the hormones that affect our mood, our ability to connect, our ability to manage stress, our memory, and all of that. All of that is kind of managed by these neurotransmitters and hormones. And so I wanted to lay down that critical groundwork, because as we move forward and we're going to take this long march down the issue of screen time, we're going to be discussing issues like ed tech. We're going to be discussing issues like who's accountable. Is it the big tech companies, the parents, the bureaucrats? We're going to be, excuse me, looking at that long journey from Coco Melon and your little 2-year-old who gets overstimulated from all those colors and sounds and you know, the short screen cuts, all the way over to TikTok, and the fact that your adolescent teen does not want to come into my chemistry class. They would much rather be in the hallway trying to learn the new TikTok dance. And so we're going to kind of take that journey across these various platforms. So that's what we're going to be doing during this multi-part series on screen time and our child's development. And so right now we're just laying the groundwork. So that's my little reset to the space. I see Ty Tutoring came up. So glad to have you back. I love your point of view. And if you're available to speak, the mic is yours.
I love this space so much. Thank you, Hassan, and everyone who's here today. I wanted to share something interesting. I was at a school board meeting, and it's not the school where I work. It's at a different district, because I was covering their school board meeting for the local paper. And I think it's interesting because at this particular school board meeting, they have a student representative. And it's not, I meant to scratch that. It's not just at that meeting, it's at all the meetings, because I've been there multiple times, and they have a student representative that's there. Now, in all the meetings, I've never heard or seen this particular student talk. I've just seen them sit on stage where all the other representatives are, and the adults talk about business and budgeting and things of that nature. But this particular meeting, she got a chance to share something, which was interesting. So she had done a presentation on early childhood education and screen time, and she wanted to share what her findings were. And she's involved in a high-level science program at the school. So for this program, they actually have to conduct professional research and present that research at the end of the year. So this student stands up and she starts to present her findings. And first, she defines early childhood education as like primary and elementary school. So those were the kids, that was the demographic that she was studying. And she also had to define what screen time was in the context of her experiment to make it legitimate. So the definition of screen time for her was independent screen time, not with a teacher. So what that means is if a kid was on an iPad by themselves, or a phone or a computer, any kind of electronic device by themselves doing educational work, that was what she classified as screen time. However, if it was the teacher teaching in front of the room and there was a screen, maybe a smart TV or something like that, that did not register as screen time because it was teacher led and teacher directed. It was only independent, if that makes sense.
It does.
So just important to make that clarification for the screen time. So what she found was several different things. The first thing that she found was that the dilation of the pupils for the students, if they had spent anything more than an hour on the screens for independently, anything more than an hour, the pupils would not dilate properly after they were told to turn off the screens and do other activities, maybe have recess or maybe they had to complete a worksheet or do some other activities or read a book. Pupils were not dilating properly. And what they noticed as a result of this was that the fine and gross motor skills of these students were heavily, heavily impeded because the students were not able to acclimate themselves around the physical environment that they were in. So if you were to ask them to do something athletic or to move a certain way or to stretch or move their body, they were more uncoordinated than they were if they didn't have the screen time. So that was one thing that they found. I thought that was interesting because it was affecting their vision and their processing of the reality, their physical space around them. So the other thing that they found, and this is no surprise to anyone, but what she discovered was that the emotional dysregulation of the students increased significantly, causing great behavior issues. So when the kids had independent screen time for an hour or more, there was a significant uptick in behavioral challenges that the teacher had to deal with. So that was the second thing. Again, no surprise to anyone. And the third finding, I thought this one for me was outside of the pupil dilation. This one was for me the most interesting. And that was how the screen time, the independent learning time impacted learning. So what did the kids actually learn when they were engaged in these quote unquote educational games or activities that were online? And what the student found, and I hope I'm wording this correctly, but what she found was that the students actually were not experiencing learning in the same way that they do when the teacher is speaking, or there's guided instruction, or there's hands-on activity, project-based learning. They're not learning in the same way. And what specifically what she means by that is retention. There's no retention of the information when it comes from the screens and these games, especially when they're doing it independently. And she said the way that the brain essentially processes the information for these kids is that they're looking at it from a purely gamification standpoint.
Yeah.
So when a question pops up or they have to click a certain button, they're looking at it from, okay, how do I get the screen or the game to give me the response
points.
and the reaction,
Yeah.
yes, that I want, as opposed to how do I, derive the correct answer, or how do I learn or retain this material and information? That was not what occurred. So the retention and the learning of it basically, in other words, what this means is that it was not time well spent in really any regard. It made them less coordinated. It affected their vision. It also affected their emotional regulation negatively and impacted the classroom in terms of the behavioral environment and the culture that the teacher wanted to establish, because the kids were just out of control at that point. And then also it did absolutely nothing for learning and retention of the information that they were supposedly learning. So I thought it was a really interesting experiment that she did. And this child is in high school. She's probably 16 or 17 years old.
Wow. Keep hope alive. as the parlance goes. You know what came up for me, and then I'm going to pass it to you, Leticia Lewis. So glad that she came up on stage. The vision that came up for me when you were describing the physical impact, and not only did we hear it from another previous speaker regarding the issue of carpal tunnel. So now I see that our hands are starting to be affected, but then our need to have the screen, and oftentimes the screens are really quite small, right? Your phone device, this issue of nearsightedness. So forgive me, my brain be working. The vision that came up are like the vision of these aliens with the great big old head and these great big old eyes and these great long fingers. And so I was like, man, maybe that's us in the future as we have evolved in this technological environment, and then we figured out how to travel in time, and now the aliens are actually us. Okay, forgive me. Totally overstimulated. Thank you, Tide Tutoring. And matter of fact, Tide, if you don't mind, tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself. You know, you add so much value that I think it would just make sense to let people know kind of where you come at the marketplace.
Yes, and as Annette said, not the aliens. That's hilarious. Yes, my name is Nikki Hernandez. I am a full-time teacher in a rural county in Virginia. I've been teaching for 12 years, getting ready to go into year 13. I'm a high school Spanish teacher, and I was born to teach, so I love what I do, and I'm very passionate about it, as you could probably tell. And also, I guess you could say, disenchanted with the education system as a whole. I was a full-blown believer that education was Charlottesville, Virginia, Annette. And I was a full-blown believer that the education system was designed and created to empower kids and to teach kids and to help kids. But once I got into the system, I actually learned that the reality behind the curtain was much different than what I actually thought it was. And so as a result of that, I did form my own tutoring company. We've got a ton of, great educational programs that really help kids. And it's not just about academics. It's also about exercise, getting out, being empowered, getting into the community and things like like that. So we're working with some amazing individuals. Tammy Aaron, she's the woman who played Pippi Longstocking in the 1980s film. She's putting together acting classes. And then we also just signed, if you guys know the song This Is It by Rod Forte, he, I believe, is a Christian artist. And we're getting, hopefully, we don't know yet. We don't have a signed deal or anything like that. Not yet. I just spoke to him yesterday. But I hope he comes on board and is going to be teaching music classes. He's affiliated with a lot of performing arts centers and things like that. So we're really trying to build something amazing that's actually empowering for kids, learners, adult learners, college students of really any age. So that's just a little bit about me. Thank you, Hassan, for allowing me to share.
No problem. I know that Dr. Arthur Jones and I have shared a few spaces together. So when you said that the education system was meant for the best interest of the child, I am sure that he was laughing out of his chair. All right. Let me pass it on to Leticia Lewis. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ma'am. Welcome to the Homeroom Overtime After Party. I'd love to hear your share of what came up for you.
Hi, good morning. Oh, wow. This is such a wonderful topic. I'm so sad that I came towards the end, but I definitely be checking the replays. This hits home for me because I actually fell into the tablet trap with my daughter. And it was like, oh my gosh, how do we get out of this? And it took a lot. We had to do a couple of therapies and do play therapy and really try to really overhaul our whole like system at home and just really, be more intentional, because I know that the tablet and stuff like sometimes helps the parents too, especially like you're cooking dinner and they're on their tablet and you're trying to get things done. And so sometimes for us, we're like, okay, this could help me too. But listening and hearing all these things, I'm just like, oh my gosh, no. And I had to get my daughter, when she did her last physical, the doctor said, you do need to see a specialist about her eyes. I think she had difficulty calling out some of the letters. And I was like, whoa, it's the tablet. So, it's very, it's like that reality, like wake up, like, okay, even though you're in education, you still have to, really be more intentional. And the thing is, she's super smart. And so, we use that excuse and we're like, oh, they're educational. The things she's learning, is great, but just hearing the last speaker speak about that, about like the active learning versus passive learning, I definitely agree with that. One thing I did do, trying to cut down our screen time, we got this audio player called a Tony Box, and it's so cool. But then they get to you with all these little figurines that you have to buy, each of them. But one of her, my daughter's favorite one is like this NASA set. She has like a whole set of them, and crazy that she just spouts like facts to me, and she's like, do you know Mercury is this and that? I'm like, wait, where did you learn that? So there is like the pro and cons of learning, from technology too. So I guess, I'm admitting it, I am one of the tablet parents. I'm doing better, and we are overhauling it. We've now decided to do like no tablet in the week, no TV in the week, and then on the weekend. But then even on the weekend, that's still a little too much because she's having it more than an hour, even though our therapists say an hour. And yeah, we still have a lot of work to do there because, sometimes we're spineless and we give in as parents. Yeah. But just all great information. Thank you so much.
No, I appreciate
You make it sound like a crack addiction.
Oh, it is. We're going to get into it. It has very strong addictive potential. So go ahead, Arthur. You want to jump in on that?
Oh, I was about to say it could actually be worse than a crack addiction. The thing is, with the screen time, what is their screen time spent on? So when the sister was saying that free screen time, yeah, she's correct. If it's just they're just doing whatever randomly and they're just vegging out, then yeah, they're not going to gain a whole lot from it. But if that screen time is directed and there's learning goals attached to it, so what I found to be really effective is learning necessarily without learning, if you will. So it's a thing that they're interested in anyway. They want to know about surfing. Well, this is a perfect opportunity to teach about the ecosystem that goes along with that surfing, the physics behind the motion of the water, the balance, and all of these things that go along with it. So Homeschooling is a little bit different. So when we were actually doing that, he went out to the water, stood up on a surfboard, learned about that balance. You get the physical exercise, but you also get the environmental and ecological exercise. You get all of these things happening at the same time. So when she said it's because it's not reinforced. If they're just looking at the screen, it's a lot harder for them to hold the information and then to use it, apply that information in another form or another format. So what I found that works really well, and I found this out with my youngest son, is using the screen, using the physical activity that goes along with it, and then the associative disciplines that are taught in conjunction. And the end result's actually been pretty good.
Anybody else want to jump on that before I move on to my last little point, and then we'll land this plane? The stage is open for anybody who wants to respond. Go ahead, Carla.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, Doctor, thank you for that, because that was enlightening. You kind of wrapped this up for me and you helped me put it in a different perspective, that learning engages all the five senses, and screen time is not able to do that in its entirety. It's going to touch the sight, it's going to touch auditory, but that motion that you talked about going out to the water and having that feeling, that's a learning as well. So you kind of wrapped it up for me. That was a drop the mic moment. Thank you for your share.
Oh, Dr.
You know, I
Arthur
wanted
is
to
good
say,
for that. Go ahead, Mando. Actually, Mando, since you want to go next, let me play this little piece in response to what you've heard. If you want to watch it, you can click on the link above and you can see the screen. I'm going to share the screen on YouTube, but you will also get a chance to experience it in the audio format as it relates to your question about addiction. Check out this audio. Oh, you really should watch this. It's harder to see on audio. I'm going to cut out the audio, but what you see right now are two kids, one kid with two screens, and he's flipping and switching between the two. Now what you see is some grandparents at dinner, and the kid is eating, totally disconnected from the grandparents, watching a screen. Now you see a little kid sleeping, and he's mimicking swiping, even though there's no phone in his hand. Because he doesn't have it. Here's another kid sleeping, and you can see her finger moving as though she's navigating across a screen. Click on the link and you can see what I'm talking about. So yeah, when we talk about addictive qualities, you try it, bro. You try to take away a kid's tablet after sitting on it for an hour or 30 minutes, and you're gonna see the wrath of a toddler. But let me yield to you so you can respond to what you've heard. Mando, mic is yours.
Thank you. I'm not saying that I don't disagree. I do find it. I do believe and agree that it is and can be addictive. The explanation seemed to me very hysterical, right? Because it sounds like it's almost like heroin, and I found that fascinating. But I also find that there is a bit of bias that exists, and the acceptance of the digital platforms in education, and I'm not sure where it will stem from. I can only assume that it is this reluctance of the evolution of education and what it looks like. I don't think it's fixed, and I made the point in the chat, but I made it in a kind of funny way, where my text or my comment was abbreviated or contracted in a lot of ways, right? To mimic the way that people tend to speak, and how when you go to maybe write professionally, right? Quote unquotes, I put quotes around that, right? I'll tell you why I put quotes around that in a bit, but it translates. So could it be possible that we're experiencing an evolution in education, right? And how similar to how cursive is now outdated, right? To where we will find these sort of little things that change, where one impact could be how public education is on a decline, and we might see more rise in private education. And when I say private, I'm talking about not private institutions, but more so at-home learning, right? Because of the use of digital devices, because of the use of the quote-unquote digital classroom or the meta classroom, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I can agree with the woman that said earlier, I forget what she was saying, there's some of the aspects of learning that are like heavily impacted as far as hand-eye coordination, et cetera, but that can be supplemented, right? That can definitely be supplemented, or social skills, all of that can be supplemented. I think what we're experiencing right now is an evolution that's going to occur that we really can't control, that we try to fix, right, to what we believe our needs are, when the collective behavior, right, amongst how humans are learning is becoming, it's more, in with every day that passes, is becoming much more different than what we're used to in the past. I think there's a little bit of that occurring in this digital age, and it will be interesting to see what the discussion in your next series, or your later in the series, leads to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you. We are going to cook. I got this meat marinating in the refrigerator, and I'm gonna apply the heat to all of us. Okay, so listen, guys, we are 29 minutes after the hour. We are 30 minutes on the overtime. I see my brother RJ is here patiently waiting. Like, hey, brother Hassan, you know you got another room to go to. So he and I are probably gonna make our way to our other community meeting that we do here on Clubhouse. But listen, guys, thank you for coming. I also think that Shay Stallone probably made it to the workplace, and so I'm glad that I was able to keep her company on that long commute. We are just beginning to lay the groundwork, and I hope that you join me on this multi-part series. How can you join me? The next time I will be here will be on Sunday, where I'm going to have my full live 2-hour conference with my special guest, and we're going to be talking about this as a layer 2. So today we kind of talked about the biochemistry of it, how the brain works, what these neurotransmitters are, and these hormones and all of that. And then layer 2, we're going to really talk about the impact on our kids. And so she is a trauma-informed therapist. She is in this space as well, and she's also a technologist. And so I think she's going to bring a really sweet flavor to this sauce that we're cooking up. And then Homeroom, what you're experiencing here this morning show, is available every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so what I'm going to be doing during the Homeroom time is kind of marching us along and continuing to lay the groundwork for the 2-hour session. So if this is something you're interested in, you're probably going to catch us about 4 times a week unpacking this, and hopefully you will also be able to join us up here on stage. But with all that being said, check out the replays. The link is above. I'm glad that you guys were here to hold space. Because I'm way over time, I'm going to avoid doing what I typically do, which is called something remarkable. And instead, I'm going to yield to my 2 moderators, seeing if they would offer, for the good of the group, their final thoughts on the topic or whatever may come up with them as we prepare to land the plane. I'll start with Carla and then move to Miss Cleo in that order. Miss Carla, final thoughts on where we stand as of today.
I think we've just started breaking ground. I think I hear the argument of screen time's too much, to know we've got to find a way to use it properly. And I think your education of helping us understand from a scientific perspective, as the scientist, what it's doing to the body is going to help us frame as we move forward. I think all of the inputs from the educators was extremely valuable, and prayerfully we get more people in here, because this is impacting our children and it's important. I'll land.
I appreciate you. And I will also slide this mic over to Miss Cleo. Final thoughts.
I'll just say I look forward to how we think about what balance is at the end of, all of this discussion, because like make decisions about where balance should lie and what balance looks like. You really have to be informed about what are the impacts. Like you don't know how much to balance something until you know the impacts. I think even just the sharing about the 1 hour allowed Leticia to think about the balance she already had and realized maybe it wasn't the balance she actually needed. So I look forward to kind of looking at what that balance looks like, what it looks like at different ages, what are the different options for creating balance, what are the different tools, and how do these each impact them. I think there's so much space and room here, and I really look forward to continuing to learn about these different chemicals and things that are happening. Oh, you changed the title. Oh, okay, sorry. I would, one last thing, I put it in the chat. I encourage you, you have the like next 5 weeks of Sundays
scheduled, I think you should schedule them in the actual house,
Mm.
so that as people are as you're talking about them, they could add them to their calendar when you kind of do the like forecasting of what's to come. People could add them and increase their likelihood of actually showing up on Sunday. And as you know, your homeroom topics, like you did today, changing them to those topics in the house and making more utility out of the house space. So that's just my personal recommendation,
Oh,
unsolicited.
all right, accountability partner helping me be better. I appreciate it. Listen, you guys are in the educator's house, whether you are professional educators like Miss Cleo, like Leticia, like Ty Tutoring, or you're a Dusty like Mando. All are welcome. If you're a homeschool teacher, a technologist like Dr. Arthur Jones or Anointed Steps, everybody's welcome, because what we want to do is to bring the community together. So my community of fellow educators and colleagues are here to create space for pedestrian people and general people, because I don't think this conversation, while critically important, because there is no success without successor. So if we're not really thinking about this meaningfully, we're gonna end up in more hot water. But how can we make it accessible to the general audience and the person for whom this is not top of mind? Well, that's what Educators House is here for, and I'm glad that you guys are here. So please join me on this journey. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and land this plane, but I will see you on Sunday, and I will take your advice, Miss Cleo. So we're going to close this room down in 5. Hopefully you can find 5 people that you can follow to improve the quality of your experience on this app. Closing this down in 4. We are here for you. If it was up to me, Amunette, Miss Cleo, Annette, and my little core crew, we could just have this conversation amongst ourselves. But we do this for the good of the group. So if you know anybody that would benefit from this, a parent who needs to really think about it like Leticia has, another educator or professional technologist, please share this space, because the only way that I can grow is if you guys tell other people what's popping off up in here, okay? We're going to close this room down in 3. This is not about me, but this is a we thing. So I try to be very intentional about centering the voices of the members of our community. So thank you to everyone who's on the stage for your decorum, your transparency, your courage, and your insights. Finally, we're going to close this room down in 2. I am here to serve. So as your host, if you got feedback for me, ways that I can make this space more valuable, more productive, and more safe, just like Miss Cleo said, please hit me in my back channel. Let me know how I can improve in order to make this experience even better. And finally, we're going to close this room down in 1. Please keep this in mind. You're the one. You're the reason that I'm here. So engage in some healthy self-care between now and the next time I see you, so that you can give unto others of your overflow. Appreciate you guys. I'm out. Peace, peace, peace. All right, YouTube, let me stop this. I'm probably going to get a copyright claim for playing this extended video along with mine. So I don't know exactly how that part's going to go. Let me shut this thing down for the algorithm locks me out of here. But thanks, guys. I hope you guys see where I'm going with this, and I hope that you can join me along the journey. I'm going to take her advice and try to get as much of this stuff pre-planned so that you can schedule for it and you'll know exactly when things are happening. But again, I'm a solopreneur, so if you have any time to help me build this thing out, I would certainly appreciate your support. And we'll take it from there. I'll see you guys on Sunday. Peace, peace, peace. Now, where's that button? There's a button around.